today. We have a couple of guest speakers, Sean Mashu and Vince Park from Qualcomm. We're going to talk about aftermarket safety devices for C-V2X. We're very excited about that. We have some really great updates for you. Oh, here we go. Looks like we also have some slides. Ryan, can you just go to the agenda really quick? And then just put that in broadcast mode.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Slideshow, yeah. Okay, so we're going to welcome our newest member. We'll also provide a few updates on our working groups and some things happening in the life of OmniAir. And then we'll try to get through all of our updates fairly quickly so that we can leave room for Vince Park and Sean Mashu. Also, I know that some of you have had some questions regarding waivers, and I believe, if Vince, correct me if I'm wrong, that we'll have Qualcomm's Senior Regulatory Counsel on the phone who can provide some insight and guidance for those still seeking waivers, and those who've received waivers and not quite sure what to test for FCC certification. So we'll be looking forward to that. Okay, well, without further ado, let's move on. Of course, you can see our full membership here. I think one of the great things about OmniAir is that we do have a full complement of the C-V2X and tolling ecosystems. If you know of companies that you think would benefit from OmniAir membership, or conversely, where we would benefit from their counsel, please do send them our way. But we are here to welcome our first new member in a couple of months. Ryan?
Yep. I don't know why it's not there. Just have to talk about it. Their logo is rolling.
It's Rolling Wireless. We're pleased to introduce. They are a module manufacturer headquartered in Luxembourg, very involved in the connected and automated vehicle ecosystem. Will be, we believe, at PlugFest, so we're very excited to have them on board. Other big news that's been happening this past week, we have received some great news from the Federal Communications Commission. 17 additional waivers have now been granted to a number of states and cities and to several device manufacturers. We're really excited as the FCC is now paving the way to allow more deployment of C-V2X. We're starting to see more RFPs let by state DOTs and cities. We're starting to see more need for certification, and we believe that's OmniAir's role and focus here is to help build trust into this ecosystem by offering certification that we hope will be required in many of these RFPs. And we're starting to see a number of devices come through that certification process now. So if you are interested in applying for certification, please do reach out to myself or one of our staff, and we're happy to help you, or visit our website. You can simply apply online. Next, please. We will talk more about this a little bit later, but we just wanted to introduce Roger Babu from Danlaw. He will be our new chair of our Aftermarket Safety Devices Working Group. That will have its inaugural kickoff meeting on Thursday, September 7th at 11 a.m. Eastern. You can join, sign up for the working group by clicking on this QR code. Or just go to our website and join working groups, or email Brenda if you have questions about how to join. And we'll hear a lot more about ASDs from our guest speakers just in a few minutes. Also on tap, we have an exciting webinar. We're getting back to starting to do a series of webinars. This will be the first of several that we're going to do on the fall on some discrete topics. This one is on post-quantum cryptography. Specifically, what does the quantum computing world mean for V2X security? Martin Iso from Microsec will be our guest speaker on that. He has some really interesting thoughts, and I think there's some solutions that are really not that far away that can help to address this challenge. And some of you may have seen today, NIST had an announcement where they're developing some cryptography standards for a post-quantum world. So we think this will fit in very neatly with this presentation. So we're really excited about that. Of course, you can click on the QR code and sign up, and we'll circulate the Zoom link shortly. Next, please. Also, coming up in September, we're doing a virtual testing event, and it's absolutely 100% free for our members. We are setting up one-on-one sessions for V2X vendors to meet with and complete testing, some security testing in a virtual format with leading PKI providers, including Atos, BlackBerry, Integrity, Microsec, SaySolTech, AutoCrypt, and I'm probably missing one or two others, but I'm very excited to have this event. We're going to be learning a lot about the new test cases that we've developed for 1609.2.1 conformance. I think there's a dozen to 14 test cases that have been going through the cybersecurity working group, and we're hoping to get some feedback on those, some exposure. These will be completely confidential sessions. We'll be able to use some provide some analysis of aggregated anonymized results, just like we do in PlugFest. And of course, it's a taste of what we would do at our PlugFest for the sort of full security testing that we do. This is absolutely free. It's completely virtual. There's no need to send devices anywhere. All will happen in a virtual environment, no plane tickets involved. So please do sign up, again, with this QR code, or just reach out to us. I think we also have a listing on our website. Next, please. And as I was speaking about events coming up, we're really excited that we're starting to get a large number of participants for our OmniAir Taipei PlugFest. This is happening the week of November 6th through the 10th in Taipei, Taiwan. We have 14 test station providers, including our SCMS providers. As part of that, 11 device manufacturers and module manufacturers participating in this event. We're really, really excited to be doing this. We're partnered with the Taiwan Telematics Industry Association, and we'll be doing several days of laboratory testing, several days of field testing, laboratory testing taking place in one of the premier universities in Taiwan, and the field testing at D-City testbed for 5G and C-V2X. And I think there are at least 9 RSUs that are hung in different environments there. So really exciting opportunity to get involved, especially for many of our members in Asia and Australia who just haven't been able to make it post-pandemic to some of our events. We're excited to bring PlugFest to Asia for the first time. Early bird pricing, I just remember the early bird pricing does extend now through September 15th, and then will be a jump in prices. So if you're planning to sign up, then go ahead and sign up now. Just today, we've issued a call for speakers. We have a series of topics we've listed there, from testing and certification around the world to standards harmonization, AI and transportation testing, cybersecurity, and a number of other topics. If you are interested in speaking, let us know. We'll have technical tracks as well as some mega sessions. I believe the TTIA will be bringing in some officials from the Taiwanese government, including Ministry of Transport and Communications, as well as Ministry of Digital Affairs. So very, very excited about that. I'm looking forward to this event. And again, you can find this on our website or click the QR code and submit a speaker form. And if you have questions about it, Brikinda Cantlow is your point of contact. Next, please. And of course, our working group leaders, we do have one vacancy left in our certification working group. Part of Parikh has had to step aside from that, but he's done an outstanding job over the past couple of years leading that group. That group helps to set our certification policies and procedures. And if you have an interest in helping us kind of develop program scopes from some of the exciting new programs we have, do reach out to myself. We're the chair of our board of directors, Steve Novosad, and we'd love to have you. We will have an announcement next month for Stella Joseph to introduce herself as the new chair of our RUC and V2X-based tolling initiative, but we're going to let her get her bearings before we do that, and she'll have a lot to say, I'm sure, in September. Next, please. So we're going to go through our working group updates fairly quickly. I'm going to ask Mr. Roebuck, if he's on the call, to walk us through these updates, just being mindful that we do have guest speakers coming up shortly. Mr. Roebuck, floor is yours, sir.
Can you show me this whole slide? I can't see. I'm only getting portions of it. In our technical working group, basically, we have been working through all the test specifications, bringing them up to date, because there's been a lot of standards changes. And I did do a lengthy test laboratory authorization and test equipment review in June. And a lot of these documents are reflecting that update. Was much needed since this was the first in-person really evaluation and update from testing off of the equipment and devices and basically putting them back into the test specs. So appreciate all the help. There's a whole bunch of documents in 14-day working group ballot proceeding through the process. And I believe this is the last day for comments for 2 or 3 of them, which I want to get into the next stage of the process. And the tolling and emergency group, yes, we are completing the last 2 specifications in the MOLI protocol certification program. Although we've been doing probably 90% of it already out in the field, we hear a lot of the major agencies, when you do the 6C, they do want that to be tested in a MOLI protocol reader state, because that's the way it's being implemented out there. So the last 2 items, we're working on the TDM and the 6B conformance with the test tool, and also doing the tag programming, finishing that document. And this is something actually is putting in more comprehensive than what has been done on testing by other groups or agencies in the past. So we're actually adding more to it than what's currently being done. Our issue working group, we did a walkthrough from TS10, they took our comments to heart. We walked through of them. There'll be another joint review meeting in September and October. One of the major things that came back on that is the radio modem is an option in the TS10 spec instead of being as a mandatory requirement. So you'll have the flexibility to serve multiple environments on that perspective. We are still working on the TCI 4001 requirements, which we've took from the RSU and translated in C to VDAX, and looking at what is new to us and try to implement. The VDAX applications, we are taking those documents, we are applying them in the next Plug Fest. We have taken some of the work that Drive Ohio has brought on red light violation warning, construction zone stuff, and they just provided us some more inputs for curve speed warning to put into an industry process. And that's proceeding accordingly, both in the field and bench. On the RUC stuff, we have been looking for stakeholders in that stuff from agencies who want to go look at the J3217 fee-based stuff. We're looking for interesting parties on that. Then on the RUC standard, at this time, currently that's in an SAE balloting mode that we'll have to go back through because it didn't meet all the criteria. But we are looking forward to see how we can get a little head start on that perspective. Next slide. Certification working group. We have I have updated so-called the test plan and the test cases we actually developed. We had previously had a 753 document explains our whole certification process has been released. It is open on our website as a public domain document, and so people understand us, what we do, what components are involved. There is a companion document 750A that's going through its final thing that gives a listing of all the test cases that makes up the major elements that will be the same way, and where it can be used at agencies and other call outs in the standards and the industry groups moving forwards, such as if you're looking for how to apply it in a US deploy type situation and other parts of the world. In the cybersecurity working group, they are busily working for this virtual plug fest. The sub-working group has put together a very comprehensive 16.2.1. Greatly appreciate the SCMS providers, the 6 or 7 of them that's been actively working on it. And you can see the results of their stuff in this virtual testing event in September, and actually should position as well to do a lot of the stuff in Taipei in November. We'd love for everybody's participation in that perspective. Also, they're giving me a really good working group draft that we're going to put through a working group ballot here next week. So it can be vetted by more people, such as the test equipment, device manufacturers, the test equipment providers, and that. So a lot of activity going through there. Next slide. Thank you. If there's any questions, send me an email. Thank you.
As always, and Ryan, just back to the last slide, as always, you can get involved in our working groups, sign up on our webpage or reach out to Perkenda or click that QR code. Would love to get you, you or your colleagues involved in our activities. And so I'm very pleased to now be able to introduce our 2 guest speakers. We have a big topic, so it's going to take 2 men to handle what we think is going to be a fantastic but detailed discussion on aftermarket safety devices for C-V2X. As many of you know, states and cities are moving ahead very quickly to deploy C-V2X. Engineering cycles for automobiles can be a little bit longer, but we're starting to see C-V2X pop up in fleets, in transit, emergency vehicles, bicycles, all sorts of really unique applications. And we think also in private automobiles in an aftermarket setting before you'll see the full deployment across all models of OEM installed devices. So what does that mean? What does that mean for certification and testing? And then why do we think it's important that we're launching this new working group? I have asked the 2 gentlemen who I think can explain this this sort of emerging world to us the best, Mr. Vince Park and Sean Michoud. Vince, of course, is an OmniAir board member. He's the Senior Director of Technical Standards at Qualcomm. He serves not only the OmniAir board, but also the 5GA board. He's very active in ITS America, SAE, and a number of other organizations where he's been focused on everything from C-V2X to ADAS to automated driving. Lots of great work. And of course, Sean Michoud is everywhere doing everything all at once. And he is a principal engineer with Qualcomm. Some may recall Sean's participation in probably most every OmniAir Plug Fest. I think he's setting a record for that. So both these gentlemen speak with great authority on this topic, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their remarks. Mr. Park, Mr. Michoud, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I guess I'll turn my camera on. Maybe, I don't know if it helps folks to see who I am a little bit. So Vince Park, happy to be here. Obviously, Qualcomm's been a member of OmniAir, and we've had people like Sean participating for quite some time. I'm a little bit more new to the process in OmniAir, I guess, and just earlier, a few months ago, I guess, joined the board, and I'm eager to get more involved, right? So I'm trying to get my hands dirty a little bit, my feet wet, and really understand how we can help move things along. So Sean, though, obviously is our real winner here in OmniAir. He's the, as Jason mentioned, the guy who's been participating in OmniAir for a very long time, and he's very much got his hands in all the details, but also on the engineering side in Qualcomm on products and interactions with customers and such things. Sean is well involved. So with that, why don't we go to the next slide? So I want to thank Jason because he actually mentioned some of the things that I was going to describe. But let me say one other thing first. You may have seen some variants of these slides already. We've kind of been working on within Qualcomm, working on a slide deck related to aftermarket safety devices for some period of time. We've been refining it. We've been sharing it with various parties, customers, partners, other stakeholders, many different folks, and kind of getting feedback and to use to kind of refine it. And so that's the basis for this slide deck. So even though Sean and I have our names on it for today because we're presenting, the reality is this is the work that came from many other folks within Qualcomm and interactions with others within the industry. So why now, really? What is the motivation here? And I think Jason kind of hit some of the points, right? We have these joint waiver. The joint waiver was approved fairly recently, and now we've recently had 17 additional waiver requests approved. And if you look at those, a lot of the requesters there are affiliated with deployers and state DOTs and infrastructure owner operators, those kind of entities that as we start to see them wanting to deploy. Of course, there are OEMs there too, but I think as Jason kind of mentioned, I think we can expect that OEMs path to deployment sometimes can be longer just because of the process for getting new equipment into vehicles and getting it out on the road. And obviously they've been somewhat waiting for a little bit more clarity with the spectrum situation and things like that. So our hope is that there are others that can move faster than some of the OEMs. And we hope that OEMs move as fast as they can. But in the shorter term, there's an opportunity to make sure that we're enabling the IOOs and other parties to basically get deploying on these waivers as soon as possible. And so that was kind of the thinking behind this idea of looking again at these aftermarket type safety devices. And again, this is not a new topic. This goes back many, many years that such things have been talked about. But we're looking essentially what kind of summarized on this slide, devices that are easy to install, that maybe use another device for their interface, to provide alerts, that are maybe not as tightly integrated into the bus, that hit a relatively low price point, to encourage this early adoption and facilitate deployment basically in this early stage. And then, and we kind of anticipate that there could be different flavors of these, right? We see again what different vendors are already working on and showcasing and bringing to events and to trade shows and such. And sometimes you have antennas integrated, sometimes not. Sometimes you can imagine, again, even how you use the device, whether you have it, for example, on the dashboard of a vehicle versus you actually do a little bit more work and then you have an external antenna. Or is it on something like a bicycle where maybe, again, you have better visibility of the sky than if you put it on the dashboard of a vehicle. So all of these things can have some impact on things like positioning accuracy and such. And so what we wanted to do was think about the types of devices, their capabilities, and the use cases that can be enabled by those, given those, capabilities. And do we need to basically think about how to then certify devices for those different needs? So that's kind of, in a sense, the motivation. So based on our discussions with others and our internal thinking, we were kind of looking at essentially 3 categories of devices. And I always feel like we're never good at picking names. So we can adjust names and things like that as needed. but for lack of better names, we started calling them ultralight, light, and full. And the distinction you can see is kind of roughly underneath, right? Maybe a difference in accuracy level. So starting at the left, you may be looking at road level accuracy. Moving towards the right, you get more lane level accuracy, and essentially full accuracy as defined by standards like J3161. And then in terms of maybe range, there could also be differences. In terms of how integrated they are, they can be differences. And I think I'm going to pass the ball over to Sean here in a few minutes, and he's going to go through this in much more detail. But that's essentially what I think we were kind of looking at. And I think as you go over towards the right, towards the full size, you can think of it as a device that's basically capable of meeting all of the requirements as presently defined. So in that sense, it's a fully capable device that meets all the performance requirements. The potential difference is that while an OEM would potentially integrate such a device into their vehicle and be able to do a certain level of compliance and conformance testing, as they integrated it into their vehicle system, if it's an aftermarket device, there's variation there, right? So the capability's there, but do we still need to worry about making sure that it meets the requirements as it is installed in, say, an aftermarket scenario? Okay, next slide, maybe. Well, this one looks like it got a little messed up in somehow translation, but it's good enough. I think I should be able to explain it. So basically, we kind of showed, what we see is potentially happening within OmniAir. And I guess I should be very clear. This is obviously, we're at the very beginning stages. You can kind of see even in the OmniAir milestones there. We did a presentation at the board like back in June. The ASD subgroup that Jason mentioned is being formed with Roger from Danlaw as the chair, is having their kickoff meeting in early September. So we're very early days. So, honestly, the group has not looked at this slide yet and discussed it, and we may have to make adjustments. But we wanted to at least put something down on paper as this is, the proposal, if you will, or the target. And so along those lines, we kind of have the work in OmniAir with some timelines leading up to maybe an initial draft of some test specs that we could bring to the Plug Fest already this fall in November. And then some time to analyze the results and maybe update specs to go to the next Plug Fest. And then hopefully at that point, you can kind of do what we would call kind of a soft launch around that time frame. And then maybe, again, another chance to make small revisions, hopefully small at that point, and then really launch the full certification program. And in parallel with that, we were thinking that there probably needs to be some work done in a standards body like SAE. And there, the idea would be to basically just start a new project to basically develop a document that really outlines some of the use cases and requirements, provides some guidance on what those different requirements should be, and again, that needs to move fairly quickly if we want to keep it in line with this idea of having it done before you go to launching the certification program and such. So it gives you at least an idea of the timeline. Fairly aggressive, because as I mentioned, the idea here is to enable early deployers on waivers. And so it really needs to be, I think, fairly aggressive. And I think that's the last slide that I will present. The ones with lots of words on it, we're going to let Sean talk to. So Sean, the ball is yours.
Thanks, Vince. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, I think, and then we'll address them. I'll get through my slides quickly so we have time to talk about any open ideas or quick questions that we can address in the limited time we have. The idea here is that these are really just placeholders for potential devices that folks are building, want to buy most significantly, and that the exact definitions are still TBD. I think both between the work groups Vince mentioned, what these devices look like, and what they do is entirely up to a package definition that we get some flexibility on here that you don't get with an auto OEM, where you get to say, I want to buy this device and I need it to support this set of applications, this set of understood. And obviously OmniAir's got very strong momentum in building application testing for the well-known and beloved use cases that are frequently very lane level, like red light violation warning, curve speed warning, traveler information, spot weather, and the applications that the application work group has been working on, and the testing automation framework that I've been trying to help out with. You might want to mute Alice. The the good news is what we've mostly been talking about are applications that any onboard unit, whether it's a light, an ultralight, or a full, probably should be able to do when they have good GNSS, maybe good vehicle integration. But this category of ultralight on this left column here are the devices that we think are the applications. These names are the official US ARKit application service packages, which describe all of the great things you can do with connected vehicles and connected roadsides. The interesting thing is a ton of them, in fact, the majority of them, don't require lane level accuracy. Ultralight ASD may have perfect great lane level accuracy when it has an external antenna or has favorable line of sky view conditions, but not always. But that's the same as a production vehicle. They don't, we talk about what a full OBU or production vehicle can do, but even that is when conditions are favorable, when you have good sky view and not necessarily in an urban canyon or under an overpass or in a blizzard. These conditions, these applications here, as you move to the right, build. And I've got 3 slides that sort of talk about what an ASD is, and then we'll talk about what we might need to do to test and certify. But as you move to the right, you pick up lane level accuracy predominantly on the middle column. And then to the right is all the capabilities that you would expect from a regular production vehicle. These are the things where you need correct accelerations, the kinds of things that OmniAir already certifies as an OBU, but with some additional challenges we'll get into. V2I, one of the main things we hear from the people purchasing equipment today is they want to be able to do things like TSP and priority and preemption, and that doesn't always require lane level. There's a fair amount of that can be done with road level, and that's the idea here, that these devices can implement that, as well as a lot of the I2V signage and notification, and possibly even V2V. Sometimes we also talk about the V2N, which is the main thing we need that for is the SCMS updates. One way or another, we've got to be able to get cert top-offs and CRLs and CTLs all updated into these devices, and people purchasing the devices need to make sure that that is going to be available without too much hands-on updating. The lane level also allows you to add additional application cases, and then the full is really just, whenever you have open sky, you should be expected to meet the same normal OmniAir connected OBU profile. Next slide, please. The slide here we're talking about, this is sort of walking through what the existing standards we expect these to meet are, and how we might certify, what kind of trust levels we're expecting, what the hardware looks like, and what the positioning differences are between these. On the standards, we're really still all talking about the SAE J3161 and the J3161/0, which is really just J3161 for I2V, V2I, which is our channel radio profile for SPAT and MAP and RSM and SRM, SSM, all those kinds of messages. Again, one thing that may require change or relaxation, either in testing and in standards, is that we may not be able to meet the vehicle radiation pattern. I think we want to allow and enable devices to have in-vehicle radios, antennas, and not necessarily require a full install bay kind of attached antennas. The brought-in device that we see becoming available now already, those may not meet the vehicle level radiation pattern, or the accurate acceleration in the vehicle axis, the yaw rate of the vehicle and the longitudinal and lateral that require typically accelerometers, solid state gyros, one of these inertial motion units that is fixed and well calibrated to the GNSS vehicle motion. Those things may not be possible, and those will produce still BSMs and consume BSMs and all the other IDV messages, but have to have this sort of discounted brand that you can't trust it the same way you would a production vehicle. As you move up in category, one of the main distinctions of another category would be devices and vehicle installation and devices that do meet the accuracy and the radiation pattern, but maybe are lane level. Both of these two, light and ultralight, though, have the same kind of concept of possibly relaxed motion and accelerations. Whereas the full would meet all of OmniAir's normal standards. But what's interesting about what 3161 and even our certification programs in OmniAir allow, and I think it's because the folks at working on the SAE spec years ago for 2945/1 always had aftermarket safety devices in mind, that you're allowed to put OBUs in vehicles that don't have anti-lock brakes or traction control or stability control or airbag sensors necessarily populating the BSM. The BSM is asked to populate these if available, but there's nothing that has ever said you must in every BSM be able to populate those. So we still should always be able to generate the hard brake, for example, from internal accelerator motors and things like that. But a big piece of this starts to become sort of vehicle plus installation. And that's where the certification work has to come into play. We'll get into this hopefully in Roger's work group, where we'll start talking about what test cases we can leverage, what test cases we need to add, what kinds of additional certifications or letters of assurance or whatever is needed to make these devices usable and quality for the customers and deployers. The trust is interesting. Trust is sort of talking about how the ultralight and light, it's very unlikely that while these are on the road generating BSMs, consuming BSMs in the same maps that production vehicles are, they may not ever be trusted or even used by a production vehicle, because they are this slightly different type of install that may not be perfectly installed and trustworthy from a accuracy of data perspective. Like, little details that are quite big if you're generating warnings, like the exact vehicle length and width, or the exact antenna offset on the roof versus the center of the car. If those aren't just perfect, you could lead to false positives to vehicles that are counting on those BSMs being very accurate. That's why I'll get to this in a second. We have a slide on that trust. I'm not going to have time to read through all of these details, but I think the slides will be available. The basic idea is, there's sort of categories of quality and things that are needed to meet the existing standards, where we've got ASD on the far right, with full essentially being the what we certify today in OmniAir as an OBU, but with additional details that cover how it also has to be addressed at a vehicle level for radiation patterns, actual installation and acceleration and motion. Next slide, please. This slide continues just talking about the V2X communication range. This is something we don't test in OmniAir. Actually, it's not specified in SAE standards. All the parameters were designed to achieve a particular range, but somehow I think we need to cover this aspect especially to set a bar for what the quality of this device and its pattern are. Similarly, I think we're going to have to get into installation, or at least discuss what's possible for specifying out a process or a guidance on how to do these installations, whether it's somebody just taking it, sticking it on their dashboard every day versus having it in a precise installed, maybe fleet vehicle or special emergency vehicle or an autonomous vehicle. RX processing limits, some of the cost drivers on some of these devices have been, how these OBUs can keep up with the full incoming possible BSM load from full market penetration, where you could have, every subframe of every message populated with 5 BSMs. And so that those worst case loadings really add up. And that's something that I think would also be variable on some customer expectations and definitions of what these products are. Other variations might be just how long it takes to boot to get to the first BSM out. For an auto OEM, that's a very aggressive requirement. There's typically, we saw in the NPRM a few years ago for what they wanted. There was a well documented 2-second goal. I don't think all these devices, if they're being stuck to the dashboard or clipped to an air vent, might be able to meet all of these the same way, and that's something that can be relaxed. Next slide, please. This is an interesting concept. I talked about how the trust works as far as who trusts what. ASDs trust each other. OEMs don't necessarily trust ASDs. We did, unfortunately, I think if we could have done anything we wanted in the SAE, we would have had BSM fields to kind of quantify all of these different uncertainties about the install. But for example, today, there is no way to say, this is my yaw rate, but I'm only 50% sure that that's correctly calibrated and oriented. I don't know that the guy didn't set the ASD on the dashboard with the wrong orientation. There is no field in the BSM for that. So the clean way to do this today is with these things we're calling alternate route certs or ARCs. And they're really just basically, these messages are signed, they're secured, they're governed by rules just like any other BSMs, but they're known profiles. They chain back to a different route that essentially is like the ASD route. It's a parallel universe that auto OEMs can just completely ignore if they want to, or take them as informational, but don't necessarily treat them at the same degree as a full functioning factory installed OBU. And that's kind of the basis. One of the proposals, William White helped us really come up with this concept for what can be done using using the existing framework in our toolbox, essentially to allow these devices to roll out quickly. Next slide, please. Wow. I thought there was one more slide. Maybe we deleted it. It was the one that listed all the OmniAir work, so I'm glad we got rid of that one. That might have scared you. Berkenda, is there a slide, or Ryan, is there a slide right before this that talks about oh yeah, okay. And one more forward. No. Okay, yeah. So these were some of the test specs that I think we have some work that we would need to do, specific test cases. These are just things we noticed on a quick walkthrough. We can probably put this on the agenda for one of Roger's ASD workgroup meetings. And then the next slide is really showing the massive leverage. Next slide, Ryan, with the Excel spreadsheet and highlighted. Oh no, this one. Yeah, so this is addition. Okay. that this is one that's additional cases that I think we could add on top of what we do today with connected vehicle, that I think anybody purchasing an ASD would want to make sure there is coverage of. One of them is, for example, making sure that I buy these devices, is there a way to do a firmware over-the-air update, that I don't have to bring each box or vehicle back into my installation bay and plug in USB cables. So having some way to do update probably is a minimum requirement that these customers want, in a secure, cyber secure method, secure boot, all those kinds of things. Verifying the connection between the OBU and the HMI device, which is not necessarily one and the same. Some people may say, I'm going to use my Bluetooth whatever as my HMI, or use a smartphone as the HMI. That connection needs to be secure. We've had some customers mention that. Again, some concept of installation process and or calibration. And then I think, these obviously should probably be tested in a few things that we're not doing well completely in OmniAir yet, which we'll be getting to, like adding the congestion control and additional bench application and field tests. All right, I think that's it for me. Hopefully John has joined to talk about, I guess we need a minute for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. That was and Vince, that was an excellent presentation. And as you can see there, while we have launched our CVDX certification program for OBUs and RSUs, and we're working toward certification for applications, this new world of ASDs presents some really interesting challenges, and the work's not finished yet. So we're so very pleased that you've teed this up for us. We do have a couple questions in the chat box, and wanted to.
I'm going to rip through them, Jason, if you don't mind.
You want to walk through those?
Yeah, Jason, I think the idea is that the installation question is a very important one, needs to be addressed. I think the idea is we definitely want to allow non-professionally installed with that lowest category, which would be a brought-in device, or a professionally installed. And then we didn't talk about VRUs. Two-wheelers, those theoretically could be across the whole spectrum. You could have an ultralight two-wheeler where somebody clips something on the handlebars, or you could have the factory installed that meets all of OmniAir specs. That's something we have to figure out, but I think we wish to accommodate all of it. The other question is about the full category corresponding to professionally installed device. Yeah, clearly needs to be discussed. And of course, I think our goal is still on position accuracy, that is based on the J2945/1 requirements, which is 1.5 meters open sky. Here we could actually move, the SAE could choose to move to require corrections, but that's only as good as the installation. So there's no point in being 1 meter accurate if your position in the vehicle for your GNSS antenna isn't carefully installed. So that's got to be covered by this. FOTA, I think it could be any method. I think it should be over Wi-Fi, cellular, or CVDX as appropriate. Whatever the customers want to do between their roadside units and.
Hey, Sean, I do want to leave a couple minutes for.
I'm done. If John's joined.
Yeah,
definitely.
He is on. But
excellent.
Did you answer the question about the root of trust or SSP kind of option?
Yeah, I think we did heavily consider SSP. Yep. The tricky thing is that then requires reworking or adjusting the SSP over all BSMs, because we are still talking about using the same PSID, the same J2945/1 BSM. After much discussion, and we should certainly reopen this discussion, I think in your SAE or OmniAir work group to see if there are other ideas on how to have all these devices coexist but control that trust. The alternate route was a very clean, simple way to do this so far, as we thought.
Exactly, and for those who maybe know some of our colleagues that work on security, like William White and Virendra and stuff, they were involved internally with discussions about this, and this was the option that we thought made the most sense in the near term. But we're certainly open to continued discussion going forward. So with that, if it's okay with you, Jason, I think I would like to introduce John and hand the ball to him.
Please go ahead.
So John Kuzin, for some reason you're showing up with my name on your screen. I'm not sure why.
That's funny. Oh, you know what, Vince? I used your link.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
no,
yeah.
all good. But you could see me on camera, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
we do
this is
see
cool.
you. So
Yeah, so
John
I'm not-
Kuzin,
I am not Vincent Park. There's only one Vincent Park that I know. I am John Kuzin. I am a communications attorney with Qualcomm. And I just was asked to say a few words about the waiver process at the FCC and offer my help. So essentially, the FCC has in place a process now where it is allowing CV2X equipment to be FCC certified and installed by state and local DOTs and by certain car OEMs and approvals of roadside units and OBUs that are CV2X devices to be approved by the FCC. So the FCC granted an initial waiver on April 24th of this year, and then last week granted a subsequent waiver to more than a dozen other entities, mainly state and local DOTs. And those waivers allow the state and local DOTs to secure licenses to deploy RSUs within their jurisdictions and on vehicles that they control. It granted waivers also to allow equipment makers to secure FCC certifications of roadside units and onboard units. And a waiver that was granted in April granted waivers to 3 automakers to install OBUs in any of their cars, including cars that are currently on the road. So those are very broad waivers to the automakers. And any companies can file waivers as well. Other car OEMs can file for waivers, as can equipment operators, in addition to other state and local DOTs. The trick, or the recommendation I would have, is to agree to comply with the terms of the waivers that the FCC already granted. And by doing so, if a waiver was filed today that did that, for example, I would expect the FCC to grant a waiver within a few months. So some of the questions that I saw on email was, what do you do if you have a waiver and what do you do once final rules occur? So our goal is that final rules, which we're hoping will be adopted by the FCC sometime in 2024, hopefully in the middle of 2024 and not in late 2024, is that those technical terms should be at least as permissive as the waiver terms. So it would allow equipment that is deployed under the waivers to continue operating. And the industry writ large is going to be asking the FCC to grandfather equipment deployed under the waivers, because just in reality, requiring changeouts of equipment is very challenging. And I would not expect that the FCC would require that. It's just very difficult, as you might suspect, once equipment's been deployed. The goal is for the final rules to allow operations in the full 30 megahertz that's been allocated to CV2X. The waivers are allowing operation in the upper 20 megahertz. So I know we're out of time, but I'm happy if Vince and Sean and Jim Miser could share my email. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have about the waiver process or the FCC's process about this. And I'm happy if you all would like to spend some time on your next call answering any questions.
Well, John, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate your insights there. I know we've received a number of questions from our members, some of whom have received waivers, and some who are, small device manufacturers who are really just contemplating applying for that waiver process. So really much needed, and we certainly appreciate it. And if you don't mind, I'd just love to open the floor for any questions that you might have for council here.